Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us virtually. We're so excited to have you, and especially excited that we're able to extend these events past the Twin Cities area. So that's very awesome. Ian's going to be sharing a lot of cool stuff. So when you tweet at him, also tweet at MnSearch, share what you liked from the presentation. We'd love to connect and offer more engagement. Big shout out to our sponsors. Rocket 55 is our virtual event sponsor for whom we are able to make all these events free of charge. Also big shout out to Rank Rankers, Click 360, Nordic Click, and Hook Agency. If you are interested in sponsoring MnSearch and having your logo appear right up there, you can email sponsorships@mnsearch.org or visit our sponsorship page on the site. You can also contact Jason Sem directly, as he is our sponsorship director. And speaking of Rocket 55, we have a job alert. We all love jobs, right? They have an opening for an SEO strategist position. We will throw the LinkedIn description in the chat after this. But yeah, if you know anyone or you or yourself are looking for a job, that would be a great place to start. Board of Directors, you can see all of our lovely faces here. We are actually looking for 2 open positions right now. One is our diversity director. We're looking for someone who's really passionate about growing the diversity and inclusion in the digital marketing space in Minnesota and beyond. So we would love to have you contact us. Also, we are looking for an events co-director. Yes, we are still virtual right now, but when we get back to in-person events, we need someone to help out with making those things awesome, having the beer and wine and fajitas and all that good stuff. So if either of those call to you or anyone you know, please reach out to any one of us or go to our website and contact us that way. And Josh did a wonderful job explaining all the many reasons why you should be a MnSearch member, but let me take another stab at it. So right now, these events are free, but MnSearch is a nonprofit org, and for just $125 a year, you can help us continue to support digital marketing efforts in Twin Cities and beyond. And also, if you sign up now, when we get back to in-person, you don't even have to worry about signing up and getting free fajitas. You can just walk on in and you're already taken care of. Plus, you get a really good discount for our 2021 MnSearch Summit. So, and with all that being said, let's get to the reason you came. Fabulous Ian Lurie is going to be talking to us about EAT. There's going to be maybe some laughs, maybe some tears, I don't know, but either way, you're always going to learn something with Ian. So with that, virtual round of applause, and I'll turn it over to you, Ian.
So yeah, I already said who I am. I already introduced myself. I am on the 5th, at least, maybe the 7th different setup for trying to do a decent webcast. That's why you see the big fancy microphone in front of me and the headphones and all that kind of stuff. I have a ring light up here, and I'm in a garage where the lights just started flickering about, I don't know, half an hour ago, which they've never done before, of course. So you'll probably see that happen quite a bit, and you might hear me swearing. Who knows? You know, it's something I do anyway. A quick little bit about me. I was the founder and CEO of Portent. I'm still the founder of Portent. I sold the company about 3 years ago now. I went out on my own as a consultant. I am a hardcore nerd. I do some programming. My first love is actually writing. I mean, that's how I got started in marketing. And I'm a gamer. I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. And one of the problems with me being in my garage is I cannot show you my entire D&D setup. But on the other hand, there are no cats jumping up on my desk, and my 2 college kids who are studying from home will not be coming through as they're taking classes and doing whatever else college freshmen and juniors do, which is why I'm out in the garage, by the way. I am living the glamorous life of a consultant at this point. This is my my current office and workspace. Just wanted to show it to everyone to show you that, yeah, you know, now that I sold my company, I'm somewhere in the Azores being fanned with palm fronds. That's me. It's all about the glamour. I can be a little harsh at times. This presentation in particular, I have strong opinions. They will come out. I just want to point out, I grew up in New Jersey, exit 9A. So sarcasm, things like that, you know, dinner conversation was pretty much always the Hunger Games. You know, that's just, it's kind of what you're going to get from me. Nothing but love, okay? I love this industry. I love what everybody's doing. I have no, negative opinions about anything I've come upon in the SEO world in quite a while. And if I do, you won't hear me say them in public. So I have a nasty tendency to explain how the watch works when you ask me what time it is. If I should end up doing that, someone just type in the chat the word interesting. Okay, interesting. That's what my kids used to say when I would just kind of go nuts on explaining something. In fact, they still do that, except now they just roll their eyes and go, interesting. But that's what you should use, just interesting. With that, I'm just going to jump right into it. So EAT, I'm kind of assuming everybody knows about EAT at this point. I'm going to explain it, don't worry, but I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. If you want me to, I just don't want to nerd-splain, but if you want me to, just let me know. And I'll spend a little more time explaining it. I do have the chat open here so I can see. EAT stands for expertise, authoritativeness, and trust. It is something that is written into Google's search quality rater guidelines. Those guidelines are a document sent out to people who are, they review and critique Google's actual search results. And I'll get back to this in a minute. EAT is a legitimate thing, right? It's written into the guidelines, but there is a lot of crap out there about it. And again, I don't want to cast aspersions here, okay? If you have written something that is of the opinions I'm about to express, these are just my opinions, but they are strong opinions. I'm happy to engage in a dialogue about them. How's that for good election year diplomacy? There are some myths out there, and they are being, they've been pushed pretty hard, and I just want to kind of dash them on the rocks. The first one is, EAT is not a ranking factor. It's not. Okay, there is no ranking factor called EAT. You can't optimize EAT and rank higher. It doesn't drive search results. All right, it is a standard given to quality raters so that they can assess search results. It is also not the only guideline in the search guidelines. Everybody is focused really heavily on EAT. You shouldn't be. I mean, obviously emphasize it, but there's other things, right? There's other stuff in the guidelines, and they are just as important as EAT. So don't let that go. There is no EAT score. Okay, even in the search quality raters guidelines, there is no EAT score. There's a lowest to highest quality, but that incorporates all of the guidelines. So there is no EAT score, not in Google, not among the raters, anywhere else. So if there's an article that says, how to raise your EAT score, okay, I get it. They're trying to get clicks, but read it take it with a healthy grain of salt. Just make sure you double check what's being said in there. See, here come the opinions already. Someone out there is already tweeting, Ian just dissed my article. I'm sorry. EAT is not an algorithm. Okay, again, it is not part of how Google makes determinations as to what is going to rank where. It's a symptom, it's an indicator, it's a hint as to how they do it, but it is definitely not part of the algorithm. And which matters more, the E, the A, or the T? We don't know. How much EAT fits into the overall algorithm? We don't know. And Danny Sullivan has written about this, okay, as has Matt Cutts. They have both come out at various times and said, please, it is not part of our algorithm. This post by Danny is really, really good at explaining how you can use some of these rater guidelines as a way to improve your site and maybe rank better, but that you shouldn't look at the rater guidelines as part of how Google is actually ranking content. The good news is that EAT is common sense. Okay, it is totally common sense. If you look at the way we've all done content forever, okay, I have never walked out into my office, my garage, sat down at my laptop and said, you know what, today I'm going to create some completely untrustworthy, crappy content that's completely full of it and doesn't explain anything to anybody with any value whatsoever. I'm going to create completely pointless stuff. Nobody does that, all right? EAT is just a test to make sure that your content is not crap. And you can nail EAT and look better, but there are other parts of the search quality raters guidelines, in my opinion, that are about exceptional content. Most of what EAT does is it's out there so that quality raters can say, this content sucks, all right? This content lacks expertise, it lacks authority, it lacks trustworthiness. And in fact, when you go to, when you read any of these articles about EAT, you'll hear a lot about what's bad, right? What hurts you with EAT. Everything we've heard about EAT has been in the context of core updates and sites that have gotten slammed and things like that. So we all tend to look at EAT as this test to make sure you're not producing crap. That is how we tend to look at it. If all you do is put your effort into EAT, if that becomes a focus of your campaigns, you'll hear me talk about this later, you're probably hurting yourself. So just breaking it up a little bit, all right? The expertise part of EAT is just making sure that your evidence is not a pile of crap, right? That you're communicating useful information and that you do that consistently. So if I have a website and I talk about bicycles all the time, and I write another post about bicycles, and everything about my previous post has been good, solid, it's well written, all this other stuff, that's going to contribute to the idea that I am an expert. If I, on my bicycling website, suddenly write about umbrellas, the chances that I'm going to get a high expertise score, or that someone rating my content will see it as high expertise, goes down. And if you think about it from Google's perspective, if you are trying to rank higher, that means focus, right? Don't write about everything. If you look at what really gets hit the hardest in core updates these days, since Your Money, Your Life, and all the other stuff we've seen happen in the last few years started to hit, it's not always sites that are non-factual. Sometimes it's sites that try to talk about everything. A lot of sites that sell insurance, for example, health insurance, they would try to write about every kind of ailment you could possibly suffer from. But they're not authorities on that, right? They don't have any expertise on that. They have expertise on insurance. And what they're doing is they're getting outside their area of expertise. In my opinion, that's why they're getting slammed. Authoritativeness is part of that as well. And you notice a lot of overlap between these three elements. That's making sure you're just not just a know-it-all piece of shit. And I'll try not to swear too much, but again, New Jersey, exit 9A, in case you're wondering. Authoritativeness is, again, making sure you're just not shooting your mouth off, right? That you're not talking about stuff where you don't have any authority. You haven't written anything about it. If I, on portent.com or ianlurie.com, suddenly started writing about sport coats, okay, and I own one, and I think I wear it once every 5 years, I lack authority on that subject, and chances are someone's going to figure it out. Trustworthiness is about making sure you're not a deceptive sack of crap, right? That you're not just out there lying. You're not providing information that is incorrect, that your information has the hallmarks of being trustworthy. So it's well written, whatever that might mean. It's audience appropriate. It's grammatically correct. As a reading experience, it is easily consumed and interpreted. You know, those are all factors that are part of trustworthiness. Probably just heard my son start his car as he goes to work. That's awesome. I love COVID. I don't mean that. I mean, you know, this whole thing that we're currently living in. Things you never, ever, ever do. Okay, things you want to avoid with EAT. First, don't make EAT an optimization strategy. All right, I already talked about this. If you're optimizing for EAT, you're just trying not to be crap, right? You're basically fighting to not lose. That's not what you want to do. That is not a winning marketing strategy. So don't make it an optimization strategy. If you have clients or bosses, do not make a big deal about EAT. It might be too late. My apologies. But if anyone out there is a parent, okay, at some point your kid will eat dirt. This is what they do. They pick up a big old fistful of dirt, they shove it in their mouths, and they start eating it. And if you don't have lots of information, you look at it and you say, oh, my kid just ate dirt. Isn't that cute? Then you look online and you realize that one of the reasons people eat dirt is because they have tapeworms. And the next thing you do as a parent is you're starting to think, oh my God, does my kid have a tapeworm? And you start checking his poop. See, there I am again, talking about poop. It wasn't even related. The same thing is true with clients, all right? If you come to them and you talk about this one thing like EAT, okay, what's gonna happen? They're gonna immediately focus on it. Now they're gonna come to you and say, hey, what about this EAT thing? And what you want to say is, it is one of many different things we look at. It is not part of the algorithm, but it can provide us with a good hint. I don't want to overemphasize it. And then they're going to be deluged with articles about EAT. And you're going to come back and say the same thing. And if they say, you know what, we're going to fire you because you don't think it's important enough, just tell them, you know what, Ian told us to do this. And he works in his garage and he sold his company. So whatever, you're right, he's wrong. That's fine. I'm happy to fall on that sword. So what should you do? Because so far, all I've done is talk about how terrible EAT is. And I don't want you to walk away just thinking EAT is a bad thing. All right, that is not my goal here. There are valuable things you can learn and do with EAT. The first thing you can do is not just read about EAT. All right, when you go into the Google Quality Rater guidelines, take a look at all of them. Okay, take a look at all 5 of these bullets and make sure you understand them. All right, because they all have value and they're all important hints. For example, implied purpose. So if you have a page of content and it's a Q&A page, there better be an answer there. If it's a product page, it must have products. If it's medical advice or news or instructions, it needs to be accurate. It needs to be there. An example I love to talk about, and I'll talk about this more, is the Q&A page that has 1 million questions on it and no useful answers. Or the Q&A page that has 1 question and dozens of useless answers on it. Like Stack Overflow, but only evil. Does the page have the right amount of content, and is the content high quality? So you'll see in the Quality Rater guidelines, main content, MC, that comes up a lot. And Google spends a lot of time talking about this main content in the Raters guidelines. To me, this is as important as EAT. A great example, and I saw this a lot on sites I got hit with the last core update, pages where the first 5 paragraphs are speaking breathlessly about a topic without providing any useful information. So for example, I go to a page and I'm reading about how to create gaming terrain. And the first 4 paragraphs are about the first gaming terrain was created by Gary Gygax in 1842, and I'm making all this up. Gaming terrain is really important because gaming terrain is the important gaming of the terrain, and it just blathers on for 5 paragraphs. That is not quality main content. Quality main content would get right to the point. It would start talking about here's how you make gaming terrain. The right amount of content is not the average of the top 10 ranking pages. It is precisely as many words as you need to do a very good job of communicating about the topic, no more, no less. And it means that it's of high quality, it's well presented, it's easy to read, you know, all these other things. And yeah, whoever just typed that, Seth, recipes do not get to the point often enough. They are one of the worst. The next time I have to read 10 paragraphs about why cheesecake is so important to American culture, I'm gonna scream. I'm gonna reach through the internet and punch someone. It needs to be easy to figure out who's responsible for the page. This may seem like an EAT thing, but it's actually not. This is a separate thing. This is a little bit of trustworthiness, but it needs to be easy to see who wrote something, what brand is attached to that content, who can I contact if I have questions. And in a minute, you'll see example sites where Google specifically says, this does not fit this guideline. And you'll see it's a page where it's hard to find the author, or it's hard to figure out the brand, or things like that. The easier you can make it for a human being to find that, the more you're complying with this part of the Raters guidelines. And again, that's not part of the algorithm, but chances are if quality raters are supposed to look at it, then us making sure we do that is going to help us in the rankings. The quality raters guidelines have example sites. This is a learning goldmine. Okay, go through the guidelines, look at every single site in there. They have a description of the site, they have a link to the page, and then they explain why that page should get the rating that it gets. And the examples are amazing. If you want to learn about if you want to see how main content should get to the point, just find the one where they say main content gets to the point, right? If you want to see what helpful main content looks like, but not on a news site, and this is something they're very good about, is they make sure that they're not just showing you news sites and what we would consider SEO content. They're showing e-commerce and articles and Q&A and recipes, all sorts of different things, and explaining why each one's important. If you want to see what useful main content looks like, if you want to get a good look at what trustworthy content looks like, you can get all of that by looking at this list of sites. It is such a great resource. It's way better than any training course anyone out there could put together, because again, this isn't the algorithm, but Google's showing this stuff and saying, okay, quality rater, you should give this a high mark. And I will never go to you and say, and you'll hear me say this again and again in this presentation, I will never go to you and say, do this and you'll rank higher. What I will say is, Google is providing strong hints here. And there's no stronger hint than them actually showing a picture of a page and saying, here's why we like this page. So make sure you look at that. They'll show low quality content. For example, this is a piece of content that is completely inaccurate and starts with a breathless discussion of why nuclear power is important and alternative energy and things like that. Again, good opinion, good delivery of hints. And one thing I will point out is search rater guidelines do not talk about technical. So they're not going to necessarily talk directly about page speed. They're not going to talk about rendering, right? They may talk about open this on your phone and see what it looks like. They may say, if the page seems sluggish, mark that down. They're not going to say, look at schema. I heard a lot of people talking about schema a minute ago. They're not going to say that. So understand, the quality raters guidelines are for people who are not SEOs. They are not search experts. They're just being asked to look at search results and say, this is good, this is bad. A lot of babbling tonight. It's kind of hard when I'm just looking at a camera. I don't focus as well because there's no people looking at me and there's no people like nodding off or looking at their phones or anything, which I know you're all doing. It's perfectly okay. This is being recorded. Low quality content that has no answers and just mixes ads right into the copy. I use this example all the time because clients will say, well, how many ads is too many? It's not about too many. It's about whether I can separate the ads from the content, from the main content. This is an example of a piece where you can't tell. This is one where you can't tell who the heck wrote it. I'll come back to this one later. But again, do you need EAT? Do you need quality rater guidelines to look at this and say, boy, I hope nobody here wrote this, by the way, to look at this and say, this is not good content? I don't think so. Just take a look at it. For me, if I'm trying to dress for the office, this is not helpful to me. Last thing I'll say here about reading through the guidelines is pay attention to the principle, not the example. For example, they'll show news articles and they'll say, well, these folks won a Pulitzer. You don't have to win a Pulitzer. And this is where the quality rater guidelines can get you into a little bit of trouble. You want to make sure that you don't go in and take it literally. What they're saying is, here's an indicator of strong reputation. It may just be that people have linked to you, or there's been people out there saying you're really smart, or you have good references on your site. You can establish authority by simply having lots of stuff on your site. Obviously, winning a Pulitzer is wonderful, but it's just an example. All right. If you are a news site, winning an honor like that, winning an award is important. If you sell bicycle tires, there are no awards for selling bicycle tires. So that is not how you build authority and establish trust. I'm going to get to the slightly more practical stuff now. And the context for EAT, right? The time people really started talking about this was when the core updates started destroying sites. And there was Penguin, right? And we all know about that one. That one was pretty clear. You do spammy links, you get destroyed. Panda, I still question whether there were penalties, but it was Google sort of saying, yeah, this isn't so good. The core updates have definitely been hammering sites. And the guidelines, the search quality rater guidelines, are a pretty good guide to how you need to fix your site. And it's not going to be easy. There's also some reasons to just look at the guidelines, look at EAT, look at purpose, look at main content, if you just want to clean things up a little bit before Google kicks the crap out of you. If you did lose traffic in a recent core update, the guidelines may be a way to recover. They are not the only guide. You may have lost rankings because of schema spam. You may have lost rankings because your site slowed to a crawl. You may have lost rankings for a completely unrelated reason. It's not always about EAT and the guidelines. So again, this is why I never want to go to clients and say it's an EAT thing. Just like I never want to go to clients and say it's a penalty. The last talk I gave to MnSearch, I said, usually it's not a penalty. Never go to a client and say this is a penalty. Unless it's really obvious. Okay, this is someone I have worked with. They got destroyed by a core update. There is no question what happened here, right? This was a penalty. And the first thing you have to do when you get hit by something like this is you're going to have to just trash your ego, because you're going to have to do some pretty serious slash and burn. There's going to be a lot of content that you look at on your site and you're like, this is great stuff. You know, I paid good money for this. I have writers, I have editors. It looks perfectly appropriate. You know, why can't I say that? It's some politically inappropriate thing that I won't say now because people will hate me. Why can't I say that, you know, pink bicycles go faster than blue ones? There we go. You know, that seems perfectly legitimate. I did a user study with 3 people, whatever. All right. You're going to have to trash all that content. You're just going to have to do it. And there's sort of a bunch of different strategies that I start with. The first thing is I want to find the pure turd, the 100% pure turd. There's nothing of redeeming value in that content. Okay. That's stuff that we're just going to remove. And again, you can look in the rater guidelines and look for things that are shown as lowest quality or low or lowest quality. When you see that stuff, you know, that's got to go. So here's an example. This is how long does the flu usually last? Well, first of all, for some people, it lasts 3 days. For some, it lasts a month. You can't say that. Okay. Second of all, this information is completely useless because it says, well, you'll be sniffly. You might have a fever, right? There's nothing here. And the person who wrote it is not an expert. So this piece, gone, just delete it. There is nothing, sorry again if someone here wrote this, there is no redeeming value. Okay, again, bury your ego. By the way, I have written stuff that got hit by core updates. So just so you know, I have sat in this, I've been in this place. It's a dark, dark, sad place. You know, this piece, okay, I have the fashion sense of my dog, only I don't get a cool tie when I go get a haircut. This will not help me, okay? Telling me to wear shoes and to wear dress shoes. I don't know what dress shoes are. Are dress shoes like runners that haven't been made too dirty yet? Are dress shoes, you know, I have no idea. And you can ask my wife, I can get her from the kitchen and she will tell you, or either of my children, they will tell you that I don't know what dress shoes are. So if I read this article, I'm screwed. I get nothing out of it. And the grammar in this is terrible. Okay. It's a terrible piece of writing, and it has spammy links in it, and you can't figure out who the author is. You notice at the bottom it says about the author, and then there's nothing there. Yeah, shoes that you wear with a dress. Yes, Paul, definitely. Don't de-index that content, just delete it. Unless it's generating a ton of ad revenue. All right, that's when you no index it. But look at your traffic report, look at where your ad revenue is coming from. Usually I will say, just get rid of it. Just delete it. There's no reason to keep this there. If for no other reason, then it feels like cheating to me to no index it. If you have a piece of content like this and you no index it instead of deleting it, I mean, I know Google's supposed to ignore no index pages, but I just feel like even if I'm just thinking of this as an SEO, I might be pushing my luck. This is my favorite strategy. And this is the one that, you know, if you take nothing else away from this video, this discussion, this is what I want to make sure you know about. And it's the idea that you find turds with nuggets and roll them up. And again, parents, I totally apologize for the images that are popping into your head right now. But you're going to get content that is of lowest quality, right? That if you compare it to the search quality raters guidelines, or if you just look at it and use common sense, you say, you know what, this is a piece of content that definitely got me nailed. There's something wrong with this piece. It got me into trouble. There's often little bits of useful stuff in that. So for example, this is an article on bicycling.com. I'm not going to have time, but ask me sometime about why I constantly pick away at bicycling.com. I'm a deeply bitter person and I never bury the hatchet. So this is a good example. This article is terrible. Okay. But there's little bits of useful information in it. It's about commuting, by the way, bike commuting. And it has stuff in it like don't, ride in a straight line, which seems kind of obvious to me, but there's there's also in there, it says, bring your coffee with you. So ride in a straight line, but drink your coffee while you're riding. Anyway, sorry, off topic. But there's useful nuggets of information. So what I'm going to do then, if I'm Bicycling Magazine, is I'm going to use Google. I'm going to do a site search for the word commuting. I'm going to find other articles on the site that are also, in my opinion, of low quality. And I'm going to find nuggets of information in those. And then I'm going to put all those nuggets together and roll them up into a single quality piece. So another good example would be recipe sites, which I know someone mentioned a minute ago. If you have a recipe site and you have 3 pages that have, 50 words of recipes on how to prepare, say, I don't know, peppers, right? Bell peppers. Then maybe instead of having all these pages where 90% of the page is over-optimized content about bell peppers and 10% is the actual recipe, maybe what you do is you take all those recipes and you create one page that's 3 great recipes for bell peppers, right? That's how you can take all this stuff and refold it and reorganize it. I love doing this. It's one of my favorite things to do, is just finding this content and remixing it. So, you can always send something to me and say, hey, Ian, how would you do this one? Mr. Smarty Pants, do a roll up with this. This is the strategy, all right? This is the thing you want to do as much as possible. Upgrade your writing. Find typos. I had to get a copy bar in here somewhere. And some typos are obvious, right? A spell checker will find them. Some are not so obvious and tragic. I've actually found websites where it says "lick here" and they are things like real estate websites. They're not what you think. So it makes a lot of sense to make sure you go in and you check for things like this, because it can get really awkward. So go through and carefully check your writing. All right. And don't just use Grammarly, which I'll talk about in a minute, or Hemingway. You need to actually go through your website. All right. Look at your links. Make sure your link text is good. Use Screaming Frog. Use whatever. Look at all your link text. Check as many different ways as you can. All right. When you do that, you'll catch stuff like this and save yourself from a lot of awkwardness. Use Grammarly. Grammarly is a great grammar checker, it's true, but it can also do some basic kind of goal checking with your content. It's not perfect at this, but it's pretty good at pulling out intent. So you can say, I want to look like an expert, and this is not expert like EAT. This is just, this is written for people who are experts on the topic. I want to be informal. I want to have a casual tone. I want my tone to be one of these things. And then it'll go through and assess your content. And yeah, it looks at grammar, clarity, all this other great stuff, but it also assesses this. And to me, this makes it a particularly potent tool. So I love to use Grammarly. Never just go through and accept all the changes Grammarly suggests. It is just a piece of software. It is not the best piece of software at times. And then clarify your source, okay? Make sure that it is easy to tell who the author is and easy to learn about the author. Make sure it's clear what brand is behind this content. So it might be a site with many different pieces of content from many different resources, but I want to know then, who is this associated with? GoArticles.com, maybe a fashion person wrote this piece. I hope not, but maybe they did. If they did, there should be something here pointing that out, right? And if they're part of a particular website with a particular name, that name should be here too, so that they're clearly associated with that brand. You want it to be easy for people to find this stuff. So here's a site that's done it really well. They've got the brand, they have the author, and then they have the author's bio at the bottom of each page. There's a longer author bio elsewhere on the site, right? So all these pages link to that one page, which then becomes a strong central resource for all these articles that have been written. And someone today just wrote a really good piece about whether there's a new authority signal in Google, and this is part of it, right? It's linking back to individuals. I wish I could remember who that person was. But again, babbling because the camera's there. I'm so sorry. The point here is it's very easy to tell who wrote this, what their expertise is, should I care? What website is it on? Is this site relevant to this topic? Google is not going to be able to sniff all that out. But because the search quality rater guidelines say this is important, it's probably something we want to look after. And again, coming back to common sense, do you want to write a piece and hide who wrote it? Hopefully you're proud of the author, or at least neutral about the author. Do you want people to know that it's your brand associated with the content? If not, something's probably wrong and you probably don't want to publish that content. Match intent. This is another thing I go off on all the time, but Google now, the search quality rater guidelines really do a good job of explaining what intent is. So here's this example again. I have no fashion sense, right? But if I come to this piece and it says tips for dressing for the office, what do I expect to get when I get there? I want tips on how to dress for the office. This does not provide that. Okay, it does not deliver to the implied intent. That is a complete failure. And even if this article was brilliantly written about something else, doesn't deliver to intent, that's probably bad. Again, common sense. Etsy, right? I want to see cool nerdy terrain, little lights in it that blink. This is, by the way, a Dungeons and Dragons thing, because if you're not enough of a geek to pretend you're like an elf or something running around, skulking around, you can actually set up little boards, right? And then you can actually show yourself skulking around. That is a 10x nerd, just saying. And then you can look at the SERP, right? Look at the search engine results page. So here I do a search, and this is pretty clearly a commercial result. There's products at the top. There's links to product pages. Google wants you, Google is saying if someone searches for this phrase, that they're going to buy something. If you have a page that you're optimizing for this specific phrase, LED gaming terrain, you probably want to have some commercial thing on it. It doesn't have to be purely commercial, but probably if people are clicking the link, they want to see products. They want to see something they can buy or order, or at least go through, sift through and learn about. Informational, right? If you add the word tutorial to something, it's probably informational content. This is an informational SERP. Even if you looked at this looking from the perspective of the quality raters guidelines, and you looked at the page and you said, well, it's a page that lets me buy a set of tutorials. Well, okay, but if you look at the search result, that's not going to work, right? This isn't about the description of the page. This is about the intent. The intent here, if I type terrain tutorial, is to learn how to create gaming terrain. And then mixed, and this is the most common kind of result, right? Is there's some commercial, there's some informational intent on the page. For this, there's a couple of cool things you can do. One of my favorites is what I call the recipe page, but it's not actually a recipe. It's, a tutorial or something on how to do something, and at the bottom it links to all the products used to do it. So if you make materials for gaming terrain, you could create this great non-branded tutorial on how to create, a cool cliff face. And then at the bottom say, and here's all our products you can buy to do this. That's a mixed intent page. So again, if I'm thinking about the different ways to roll up content, that's one of my favorite ways to do it. Update content with a limited lifespan. There's a real tendency to look at content and say, okay, here's the 2018 content. Now I'm going to write a new 2019 piece. And what happens is all this out-of-date content starts piling up on your site. Now, if it's an annual report, maybe that's okay. But part of the reason people start doing this is because they create URLs that are date specific. What you want to do is create a non-date specific URL and put your updated content there, okay? And then redirect from the most recent version of the content to the updated content, so that then becomes the hub, it becomes the core. And if it's annual reports, so there's older ones that you can archive and present and keep on your site, that's okay. Then have those pages at date specific URLs. And at the end of At the end of 2020, you move the 2020 annual report to a date-specific URL, but you keep putting the updated content at that simple, non-dated URL. That also has the side benefit of accumulating all your links in one place, right? So it's not just that you deliver really good, useful content to people at this URL and it stays accurate and up to date. It's also that you're building really powerful links. And if you are archiving stuff, you're creating a really powerful hub. And then if the content's date sensitive, just don't have previous years, just update the same content. But the main thing is don't build this list of URLs where there's a different piece of content for every single date. And that different piece of content is never updated. So you just get more and more out-of-date content. This happens all the time. And then if you have one piece of content from 2017 that got the most links, that's going to be what shows up from your site for given search. That's going to be inaccurate content, right? That's not what you want to have happening. So kind of wrapping up here. There are no miracles, or at least there are very few. You will see people tweet out graphs where the graph goes suddenly up and to the right. That is the 0.1% where it goes fantastically. More often you do it right and you start clawing your way back. So the client I talked about before, their lowest point traffic was around 700,000. Now they're back to about 1 million. That's significant growth. It's not back to 2.8 million, and they ain't going to get there anytime soon, because a lot of what they lost was rankings for content that you can't just fix it. You have to remove that content and start over, but you do make progress, right? So they have at over 50% growth in traffic. That's great. And that's what you have to expect, is you'll get that kind of steady, slow growth. A couple of really nerdy things here, and I'll breeze right through this, but you can actually find risky content at scale. So chances are there are words and phrases associated with your business that mean that these pages are putting you at risk. Maybe it's that you wrote about sneakers or capybara. Maybe you're writing about vaccinations. Maybe you're writing about something else. You can then just create a list of those words and then do stemming. So basically you're trimming it back to the bare minimum. So if it was sneakers, you do sneaker. If it was, tinkerer, you turn it to tinker. Then you pick your favorite crawler. I'm using Screaming Frog. You create a custom extractor. And then this is a piece of genius for my pull rank. You don't have to use XPath. You can just find the CSS selector, and you can do all this in developer tools. If you just right click on an element on the page and click inspect in Chrome. I'm happy to walk people through this if they want to see how to do it. And then you can copy that selector, and you can copy selectors for different parts of the page. So you can grab the text, the name, the title, the bio. I've used this on sites where they're not in a CMS, and one particular author wrote a bunch of stuff, and we just found out that author was completely inaccurate, and we want to remove all their content. You can just crawl the site, pull the author name, and find all that content. So you run your crawl, and basically you've just built a huge database of content. You've basically just built an index of the site, right? And then you can take each piece of content, you can search for your risky terms. It's that simple. You can, if you want, use a Python script, and I can send this to you, to just search them all at once and build a spreadsheet that scores content as risky, not risky, or really risky. You can find ad-heavy pages. So basically you can export a bunch of thumbnails from your site and just skim through them and look for pages where either the ads are, it's hard to distinguish between the ads and the content, or there's just pages with too many ads on them or something else. Again, in Screaming Frog or Sitebulb or whatever, at Portent we had a bespoke crawler, a custom thing that does a lot of this. And you can take all these screenshots, and then all I do is, on OS X, on Mac OS, sorry, I just dated myself. I just look at the thumbnails in Finder, and I can just skim right through. You can check grammar at scale. So you can, again, build that index, use something like GrammarBot, feed each page into the bot, and then get back recommendations. Again, please don't just automate this and start updating pages automatically. Please, I beg of you. All right, you just want to use this to find places where there might be trouble. Check duplication, right? Grammarly has a great plagiarism checker. And the coolest thing is it finds pages where, excuse me, a certain percentage of your content is a duplicate, right? So it's not just going in and saying this page is a 100% duplicate. That can be pretty helpful. I use it on myself. I've been writing for a long time and I have a terrible memory. So sometimes I'll start writing something. I'm like, did I write this before? And I do a quick search using Copyscape and I say, wow, that's great. I just wrote 1,000 words and it's useless, but at least I didn't publish it. Great. So with all this, there's some basic rules, right? Again, common sense. Don't panic about EAT. Don't just look at EAT. Look at all the guidelines, right? And then use them as guidelines, not hard and fast rules. And above all, remember, EAT is not a ranking factor, okay? It's a great guide, and the guidelines on their own are a great guide. They can help you figure out, what bad looks like and what good looks like, but never abandon common sense, because Google can't possibly write down every good example and every bad example in their guidelines. So use them for what they're called, right, as guidelines. That's it. And yeah, the slides are on my blog, so you can go grab them there.
Ian, that was awesome. Thank you
Thanks.
so much. I feel like I'm still processing all of this. I also feel like I learned a lot of different ways to talk about crap.
I can give you so many words. I can do some in Yiddish, plenty of options here. So just let me know.
Is there a tool for that too, or is that just your own imagination?
That's just me. I'm sure there's a thesaurus out there somewhere. Urban Dictionary.
We're really happy that you're willing to do your duty, Ian.
Oh boy. Wow. Okay.
Thanks for that ad, Josh. Just pop it in there to throw that one out there. Awesome. Well, we, on a more related note, we have a few questions. So let's start with Michelle Peterson. Can you talk more about the relationship between expert authors and authoritativeness? For example, as a ghostwriter, is the best practice to interview, summarize, and then attribute content to the interviewee as opposed to leaving the author blank?
I actually have not seen, and someone's going to just thrash me for this, but I have not seen a direct connection between an author as far as their title, like an MD, and authoritativeness or trustworthiness. What I have seen is a history of that particular writer creating trustworthy and authoritative content. So someone might be a fantastic SEO and they just wrote their first piece. They are not going to have the same authority as someone who's written many pieces. Because of that, ghostwriting is not, using a pseudonym is not the best idea. You want to try and attribute content. Yeah, if it's an interview, for example, you probably want to attribute that content to both you and the interviewee. If you are ghostwriting for someone, hopefully they're an expert on the subject and you want to attribute it to them. What you don't ever want to have is, written by admin or written by staff. If you can avoid that, sometimes it's unavoidable, but if you can avoid that, you'll be a lot better off in the long run.
I'm going to piggyback off that question. I have a client where right now we're using staff until they update their WordPress. So their content is actually mostly sourced from their users. That's we take a lot of it from like Facebook ideas and things like that. So in that case, what would you recommend for being, a good author profile to use?
So if each author is providing many pieces of content, then just have a profile for them and link to it so that it becomes clear that, Ian Lurie, you grabbed a lot of his Facebook posts and tweets and it's his stuff. If it's a one-time thing, I don't know, it's a great way to do it. I mean, you're not going to hurt yourself by linking to someone's profile on Facebook and just saying, this is them. It's just, you're not going to build a ton of authority unless, of course, that person is incredibly authoritative on Facebook and Google somehow figures that out. And I don't know how they would. I guess they could scrape the heck out of Facebook, but even then, there's a lot of people posting some complete trash on Facebook, right? I mean, every Russian spam operation could be super authoritative if that were the case. So I wouldn't worry about it too much unless you have someone who you are getting a lot of content from them, in which case you want to make sure there's some central place where you're giving them credit, frankly, right? Again, it's kind of a common sense thing is if you think you should give them a ton of credit, they're probably authoritative, you want to have that central page. Did that answer the question?
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay.
Totally. Thank you.
Mhm.
Perfect. Next question from Cassie. Can it hurt if those longer author pages are no indexed?
It can't hurt EAT, and it can't hurt within the guidelines. What it could hurt is, if those author bios have useful information in them that you want Google to find. So, just as an example, if you got me to write a piece of content on your site and my name is in the piece of content, right? It says by Ian Lurie, then you've just put who the author is, and everybody can figure out who it is. Linking to my bio, there's important stuff there. Google won't crawl it, but I don't think that's going to hurt you. It might hurt if you said by author and the word author linked to a page that then had my name and my bio on it, because then Google's not going to crawl that page. And if we're assuming that the quality rater guidelines are completely, if we're taking them literally, which I don't recommend, but if we do, then that means that Google can't see that content. I got to reach up when I do that. They can't see that content, which means that they can't figure out if this content is authoritative or not. Hope that helps.
Awesome, thank you. So follow-up question from Madeline on the previous question. What do you think about writing under a brand name? Currently, we just publish all blog articles under the brand, but is that too similar to admin or staff?
I think the only time I think it's okay to do that because there's still a central source. I mean, a big part of what the quality rater guidelines at least imply is that they want someone who they can hold accountable for a piece of content. So if it's the brand, right? If it's, Shiftboard or whoever, I think that's who the Madeline is, I'm not sure. That's fine, then, that's cool. Then you said who it is. Now, if there is one person at your company who is an authority on a subject, you want their name there simply because they are an authority on the subject. And as they put more and more stuff out there, they're going to start to build this profile. And a long time ago, we thought Google had a thing called author rank, which seems less and less likely. But Google in some way is probably compiling an authority profile for individuals who produce content all over the web. If this author is an expert on a particular topic and they have written all over the place about it, then you probably want to make sure people know who they are. And again, it's more common sense, right? Even if it doesn't affect rankings, you want them to know that, Jane Doe, the specialist on remote sensing, wrote this piece on your site, and they have also written all these other pieces out there. Sorry, really long answer, but hopefully that helps.
Awesome. Now this question we have from Josh. What if you have a turd that is actually ranking well? Keep it or change proactively?
Personally, I would change it. I wouldn't delete it. I would look at ways to go in and improve it. Clients don't like to do this because you might be ranking #1 for a really difficult term like bicycle tires, and that piece of ranking content is a turd. And if you change it, you may lose the ranking, and I get it. What I try to explain to people is, let me rephrase that. The client will refuse to change that piece of content. They will refuse. All you can do as an SEO is say, okay, well, just, when this gets buried, this is what I recommend we do. Because I would always go in and update it and take the risk that I'm going to lose the ranking. But I understand people are very risk averse and may not want to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Those were the questions that we had. So we'll release you a couple minutes early. But on behalf of everyone, I'm seeing a lot of, tons of engagement in the chat. Thank you so much for providing such an awesome, awesome presentation. I definitely laughed and cried at different Oh, you completely really sold me on that one. So thank you so much
Awesome.
Ian, for joining us.
Okay. Thanks, Abby. Thank you, everybody, very, very much.